Hello everyone, I'm Brenda and I'm an alcoholic.
Hey Brenda.
My sobriety date is August 4th, 2005. This is my home group. My story is very similar to the one that was told last week in that the first time I drank, I ended up in jail. Some friends and I was about 15 or 16. Some friends and I got a bottle of blackberry brandy through one of the older sisters and went to a bowling alley, and we passed that around in a circle. And I ended up laying in the aisles at the bowling alley. We got kicked out of there. They took me to a fast food place that was right across the street from the police station. And before long, the police came and took us all into the station because of my behavior. And they asked for my telephone number, and just like the story last week, I called them pigs. I called them every curse word in the book. I had never spoken like that before in my life. I don't know where it came from. And I lived in a pretty small town, and I had white hair. So every time since that incident that I was out walking in the street and a police car passed me, I felt such shame, I wanted to hide behind a bush. And that was the first time I felt shame like that in my life. And that was to be followed by hundreds and hundreds of more incidents like that. I woke up the next morning from that incident, and I really didn't remember if that really happened or if I just had a bad dream. But I felt very, very sick. And I was sucking on an ice pop, and my mother woke up, and when she looked at me, I knew it really happened. And I guess that since that incident, I heard someone say the other day that they hear some horrible stories and they feel like those people have an excuse to be an alcoholic, and that they didn't have a story like that. And I did in the end maybe have an excuse for my drinking to accelerate, but I was an alcoholic from the first time I drank, and I know that because I had no control over my drinking. I would wake up thinking about having a beer, and I had those many, many incidents to prove that I didn't know how to control myself. I would go to business functions with my then husband, and I would be dressed up real nice and say, tonight I'm really going to act like a lady. And by the end of the night, I was sitting on his boss's lap. I fell in the parking lot, running to the car. I had holes, in my clothes, and I guess each time that an incident like that happened, I carried around that more baggage. And when I was younger, I worked in a restaurant, and there was a woman that came in. She had a blonde, a redhead, and a brunette for children. And I thought, that must be the luckiest lady in the world. And comes to turn out that I have a blonde, a redhead, and a brunette. And we moved from New Jersey to Maryland, and I thought at that time, this might be a real good way for me to get a control over my drinking and, behave the way I want to behave. So we moved away from all of my friends and family. It was just my husband and I. His brother lived nearby. And we started a new life there. Now, I could always keep my drinking to a place where I wouldn't get in trouble. He might come home from work and say, "Hey, can't you wait till I get home till you have a beer?" And I say, "Yeah, I guess I can," but I would buy beer to replace the beer that was in the refrigerator. And once I discovered Goldschlager, my drinking accelerated because that could get me where I wanted to be pretty quickly. But after we were in Maryland for about a year and a half, he was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and they gave him 6 months to live, and he lived for 18 months. And as he got sicker, I then had to drink to fall asleep. I had to drink enough that I could just pass out to get to sleep. I would wake up in the morning at that time without any thought to it. I would just go right to the Goldschlager. I'd have a shot as soon as I woke up, and I would continue throughout the day. It got to the point where if I didn't have a drink, I would start to shake. If I picked my daughter up from school, we couldn't do too much with any of the kids because I would need to get to my bottle. So everything would be quick. And once my husband did pass, I thought to myself, I have no one left in this world to answer to. And instead of being a loving, caring mother to my children that just lost their father, I just thought of myself and my drinking and drank however I wanted to. And also when I was in high school, there was this girl named Mary, and she was the coolest, prettiest girl in school. And I found out one day that Mary's mom was this lady who stumbled around town. She was really looked disheveled, and I thought, I can't believe that that is Mary's mother. And then one day, I took a look at myself, and I'm stumbling into liquor stores. I can't even hand my credit card to the cashier. I have to toss it onto the countertop because my hand is shaking so much. I would go to different stores and get my Goldschlager at different liquor stores so that they didn't know how much I drank. And then when it came time for recycling, my recycling pail would be filled with Budweiser and Goldschlager, and I would save the milk containers to put on top. And it was just humiliating. I fell down the stairs a lot of times in my house, and I had a daughter that was 4 at the time that her father passed, and she would say, "You just fell down the stairs because you're tired, right, Mommy?" And I'd say, "Yeah, I was just tired." And the house was a mess. It had beer cans always out here and there. If anyone stopped by, there would always be beer cans out. I don't know why I couldn't just throw them in the trash. But also, we had this leak in the shower downstairs, and I couldn't fix the leak, so what we did was turn off the water to the house. When the leak got so bad that it had this water trail and mold coming out the bathroom and then into the hallway. So I decided to take action, and that was to shut the main water to the house off. And then I would turn it back on. We would handle all of our business, run the dishwasher, shower, whatever else we had to do, and then I would turn it off again. And that went on for a long time. Every single job that I ever had while I drank, I showed up at least one time drunk at work. Every single one. And the last job I had while I was drinking was at Home Depot. I worked in the garden department. And they called me down to HR one day to say they were worried about my behavior. And we talked, and everything was fine after that. But then I got called not too long after. They said, "You were okay for a while, but now we're worried about your behavior again." And they said if they had a suspicion that I was drinking, they would send me to get tested, and then I would be fired if I had alcohol in my system, and that would be on my record. And so I just said, you know what, I don't think this job is for me. And I left that job. And I had always wanted to be a nurse. My parents always told me I could be anything I wanted to be. But I really couldn't be a nurse because I couldn't even show up to any job without drinking. I can't even imagine going through school. I actually graduated high school third to last in my class. If there were 385 people in the school, I graduated 383rd. So, and I didn't think I had it in me to do that. So my husband died. I'm drinking like that. I have neighbors next door, Dee and Howard, and they came over after he died, and Dee said, my husband is your husband. Anything you ever need, you just come over and get him, and he'll help you. So we had a plumbing problem one time, not the shower, I didn't tell him about that. And we also had, one time we had a mouse stuck in a track, like just the tail was caught and it was running around, and I got him for that one. And he was just a very good sport. He was always kind to us, and one day he came and knocked on my door, and he said that he was an alcoholic, and he went to AA and got sober, and they recommended that he give away his alcohol and not have it in the house, so he brought it to me. And when he came, he wasn't walking right, and he wasn't talking right. He had a stroke. He quit drinking cold turkey, and I said thank you, and I'm proud of you, and I brought the alcohol in. I wasn't going to drink it anyway. It was Heineken and something else, but I only drank Goldschlager and Budweiser. And I went in and thought to myself, if that's what quitting drinking gets you, he can have it. I don't want anything to do with it. And like a week later, he shot himself in his driveway, right outside, in his truck. And the police and ambulance, fire trucks were all up the street. And I went over, and his wife was home by herself. She had gotten home from work and found him. And I went inside, and his bowl was half filled with cereal, had the spoon in it. And the police said that he had a bottle of vodka in the truck with him. And I thought to myself that he must not have been able to go on, and it was just too much for him, and he killed himself. And I wanted to go to Howard's funeral, and I wanted to go there sober, and I remembered what happened to him, so I very slowly stopped drinking that day. I cut back until his funeral was a week away. My sister was getting married, and I think it was the day after this happened, on a Friday, and on a Saturday was her bridal shower. And I had to drive the kids to New Jersey, and I didn't drink before I drove them. And I got to that shower, I could not even hold a fork. I spent most of the day outside in the parking lot. People were saying, "What is wrong with your sister?" And my mother said, "Oh my God, her neighbor just shot himself." But it wasn't that. It was because I was having withdrawal from alcohol. And so the funeral was the following Friday. I went to the funeral, and that day I did not drink. I was shaking. In fact, I shook for months after stopping drinking. I went to the funeral sober, and I thought they would say, "What a nice guy, what a shame," and we would all go home. But it was the person who spoke was a minister, and he was an alcoholic. And he talked about alcoholism and how no one could understand the pain of an alcoholic except for another alcoholic. And I started thinking to myself, I already knew I was an alcoholic, but I started thinking to myself that if I don't get it together, my kids are going to come home one day and find me like Howard. And that day, I made a decision that I'm going to get some help. And I went home from the funeral, and I cried that entire weekend. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I was on the computer looking up Alcoholics Anonymous, and I read everything that there was to read about it on the internet. I knew that you were supposed to get a home group, a big book, a sponsor, work the steps. I found out the meeting schedule. I even rode by the church where I was going to go for my first meeting, and it was at 6:30 in the morning on Monday. So I thought, that's the meeting I'll go to. And if my kids came in the room, I quickly shut the computer down. I didn't want them to see me looking at Alcoholics Anonymous. And Monday came, and I didn't tell anybody I was going. I snuck out of the house. It was in August, so they didn't have school. And my son was a teenager then, and my daughter was about 6. And I went to the meeting, and I came home. Must have been around 8:15, because at that meeting, I got a sponsor, and she gave me a big book, and I told her I wanted to start working the steps. And we talked for a little while after the meeting. And I came home, and I left all that stuff in the car because I didn't want anybody to see it. And my son and my daughter were in the living room, and he said, "Where the hell have you been?" And he might have thought I was out all night. I don't know what he thought, but I said, "I went to Alcoholics Anonymous because I need help with my drinking." And he said, "Thank God." And he gave me a big hug, and he went back to bed. And I've been sober ever since then. I did get a sponsor. When I got sober, I wore a lot of my husband's old t-shirts and sweatpants. I would wear sweatshirts inside out. And I had a lot of Goldschlager t-shirts because they came free with the bottles. And I did get rid of those because I didn't think I should be wearing them anymore. And but I would go to meetings just with my big t-shirts. And one of my friends that I met there said, "You know, you might be halfway decent looking if you combed your hair once in a while." The shaking was really bad. I think you could be walking up the block and know that I was shaking from being that far away. And I slowly got better. My sponsor was very fancy. She was very well dressed, had a good job, and I brought her home for dinner one time, and my son asked me, "Is she like the owner of AA?" And I said, "No, she's an alcoholic, just like I am." And one of the first meetings I went to, there was a lady sharing her story. It was an anniversary, and she was sober for 30 years. And she was a nurse, and I respected her. And she said that the last night that she drank, she woke up the next morning naked in her foyer with a note next to her. And it said, "I will not live with you anymore." It was from her daughter. "I can't live like this." And she didn't know where she had been the night before, why she was naked, where her car was. And I thought, with all I've done, I've never been naked in front of my kids like that. It was mortifying. And I said, if she could get sober, maybe I can too. And I knew that I also had this mental illness, like things really, really wrong with me, such as the plumbing and other things. Like I would just drink and think all night long. I would think, I couldn't stand anybody. I could see everybody's faults from a mile away in a minute. And I just sit there thinking about this a-hole and that a-hole, and if she talks to me, I'm going to tell her this, and if he that. And I would just wait for my husband's van to pull into the driveway. I'd just sit there looking out the window, and I was very, very, very sick and negative. And when I got sober, I came to find that some other people had similar psychological issues as I did. One person shared with me one time that their toilet was broken, so they sold their house. And when I got sober, I actually had a friend that I worked with at Home Depot, and her husband was a mechanic. He ran the apartment building and did all of the maintenance. He came over and looked at my plumbing problem, and all I needed was a washer, like a 5-cent washer. And that's just like one example of the insanity. And so I got sober. I did the steps. The first step that my sponsor asked me to do was to make a list of every incident I ever had while I was drinking that I was embarrassed of, that I wouldn't have done if I wasn't drinking. And I did that. I thought, like, she has no idea how humiliated I am as a person as it is. And now I'm supposed to look at all this stuff and write it down and share it with her. But it was so freeing because it helped me get rid of a lot of that baggage. There were things that if no one knew about it, I was never going to tell them about it. And it was just, it became easy. Like, first of all, the first time saying that I'm an alcoholic, going to AA, writing all those things down was just such freedom. And there were people who were in my cohort where they were a little before me. I'd watched them work the steps and what a change it was making in their life. And I was able to make the same change in mine. And I did end up going back to school. I started from the beginning at college and did all my prereqs, and I got my nursing degree. I got my bachelor's in nursing, and I was a nurse. And I'll never forget the first time driving into Bayview in Baltimore, and the sun was coming up, and I thought, this is beyond my wildest dreams, really. Like, I'm going to be a nurse in a hospital, and that's just something I never thought I could do. And then, I mean, things just even kept getting better from there. They pay for you to continue your education. I got my master's degree. I got my master's in business, master's in nursing leadership, and I mean, when I got sober, I was like this filthy, smelly pig who didn't comb her hair, who smoked all the time. My God, I smoked Marlboro Lights, and my husband smoked Newport. So when he died, there was a pack of Newport. I'm like, well, I guess I'll try these, and I would have a Marlboro Light, then a Newport, and I liked the flow, so I bought more. I can't even tell you how much I smoked a day, at least 2 packs, more than 2 packs probably. It was just smoking and drinking and stinking up everywhere I went. And I did do drugs too. I never had a drug near me that I didn't do and wouldn't finish up before the day was over. And so I met Gary at the meeting too. I don't know, like, I don't know how you get past all that. But I told the same friend that told me if I comb my hair, I might be all right. I told him, after a couple years of being there, I said, I think Gary likes me. And he said, Brenda, Gary does not like you, okay? And I said, well, everywhere I sit, he always sits next to me. And so I was proving my point. And sure enough, Gary sat next to me. And one day Gary asked me if I wanted a donut, and I said, yeah, I'll have a chocolate donut. This guy brought donuts every Friday to give back to the group. I said, I'll have a chocolate donut, and he brought me a donut with chocolate icing, and he brought himself the chocolate donut, the chocolate cake donut that I want. And he ate it, and after the meeting was over, I'm like, that was the donut I wanted, not the chocolate ice donut, the chocolate donut. And he said, you're one of the rudest people I've ever met. And then after that, we just kept talking with each other. But, and, I was a widow and didn't have a job for a while. I put myself through school. I was a nursing assistant, didn't make much money at all. And the struggle was real. I had bills piled up in pink envelopes, and Gary said, what does the pink envelope mean? I said, that means you're late in a payment. He never even saw a pink envelope before. But together, we built a life with, we mixed our families together. And he has 2 children, I have 3. And we have 5 grandchildren. We have 2 dogs. And those grandchildren will never have to see me drink if I just keep doing the next right thing. The oldest is 8, and the youngest is 4. And when I think about that ride into the hospital and how I thought life was beyond my wildest dreams, and then I think about today, it's like it just keeps getting better and better. And they promise that in the big book. Like, if you do follow the suggestions that people here give you and do the right thing, you will have a life beyond your wildest dreams. And also, when I first got sober, I had no idea what I liked to even do, because I never did anything sober. So I didn't know what I even liked to do, but I discovered that I really liked to bake. And I would go to this one big meeting where there were like 100 people, and I would bake cookies and snacks, and that was when I would paint my nails, take it off, paint my nails, take it off. I just needed stuff to do with myself to pass the time at the beginning. And the other thing is, I've met the finest people that I've ever come across in my life here in the rooms of AA, and they're the most incredible people. I used to hang out with people, and we'd be like, yeah, we'd be drinking, and if somebody's moving, yeah, sure, I'll help you. And the next day, no one ever showed up. And with AA, they're there early, and they'll bring you a coffee. I mean, it's just, it's like a whole new world that I never dreamed of, friend-wise, and even like being able to come to meetings and all that AA offers. We did that women's detention center in Baltimore, and I mean, people were in the detention center for less than I had ever done. I mean, some of them just had too many DUIs. I never had a DUI, but that was only because I was lucky. I drove around drunk all the time with my kids in the car. It was really pitiful, but for the grace of God, I was out and they were in. And some of the ladies really got into the program, and it was a beautiful thing to see. One of the other things, when I was drinking, I would be real jealous of happy people, anyone who seemed relaxed or happy. And the thing that got me the most was the park, because I would see the moms sitting there watching their kids play, and I thought I could never do that, because I mean, how do you drink and sit at the park at the same time? You can't. So when I got sober, that was one of the things I got to enjoy. I brought my daughter to the park, and I sat with those same moms and had nice conversations with them and brought snacks for the kids to eat. I mean, it's just amazing. Like, I can't imagine what the kids' lives would be like if I didn't get sober. Like, where would they be today? Because they're all in pretty good places right now. And let's see. I like to talk about when I was newly sober, everything revolved around AA, because I was just completely submerged in it. Whatever they told me to do, that's what I was going to do. And I wanted to be sober more than anything else in my life. And then when I went to school, there was one time I wrote a paper. It was the first paper I ever wrote and handed in. It was supposed to be about the scariest thing that ever happened to you. And I wrote about my alcoholism and my husband dying and me crawling in a bottle, and I couldn't get out of it. And when he passed the papers out, he said that there's one person in this room whose whose story haunted me. Like, I couldn't even sleep. I'd be awake thinking of it, and I thought, holy mackerel, somebody must have been in real big trouble. And when he put my paper down, he said, it was you I was talking about. And it is scary. It's like a nightmare on earth, and there's just no out. And the other thing that really, really hit me was the sociology class that I took, because they talked about resocialization. And 2 examples of resocialization is boot camp and Alcoholics Anonymous, because both of those programs completely tear a person down and rebuild them into a new person in order to save their lives. And that was a huge impact on me, and that's what the steps do. I was 40 years old and I could tell you everyone's flaws, but I never thought to look at my own for a minute. Or can I make any changes here with my life and my relationships? One guy that was in my home group would say, no alcoholic can have a relationship with another human being. And it's true. I loved my kids more than I can tell you, but I wasn't able to feel or express that love because I was too sick to do so. And it was only after getting sober that I'm able to do that. And the big book is really good at the family afterward. The book tells you everything you need to know. The family afterward, and don't go having your spiritual experience and finding God and try to cram it down your family's throat. So I read that and I took note of it. So I would gradually introduce, praying at dinner and stuff. It really is. It amazes me. I wish I had found that book much earlier, but that book is me, and very, very helpful. And I found one. Well, I always like to read this reading, "The Touch of a Master's Hand." I hope I can get it big enough. "'Twas battered and scarred, and the auctioneer thought it scarcely worth his while to waste much time on the old violin, but he held it up with a smile. 'What am I bid, good folks?' he cried. 'Who'll start the bidding for me? $1, then 2. Only 2? $2, and who'll make it 3? $3 once, $3 twice, going for 3. But no. From the room far back, a gray-haired man came forward and picked up the bow. Then, wiping the dust from the old violin and tightening the loose strings, he played a melody pure and sweet, as caroling angels sings. The music ceased, and the auctioneer, with a voice that was quiet and low, said, 'What am I bid for the old violin?' Then he held it up with the bow. $1,000, who make it 2? 2,000, and who make it 3? 3,000 once, 3,000 twice, and going and gone,' said he. The people cheered, but some of them cried, 'We do not quite understand what changed its worth.' Swift came the reply, 'The touch of a master's hand.' And many a man with life out of tune and battered and scarred with sin is auctioned cheap to the thoughtless crowd, much like the old violin. A mess of pottage, a glass of wine, a game, and he travels on. He's going once, going twice, he's going and almost gone. But the master comes, and the foolish crowd never can quite understand the worth of a soul and the change that is wrought by the touch of a master's hand." And thank you for letting me share.